components will
Gonna brush my teeth real quick. 양치 좀 하고 올게요.
vegetable oils, the canola and the soybean oil and the corn oil and so forth. And those are very unstable oils that have no place in a cell membrane. What they do is they promote inflammation that's destructive to cells, and they degrade the myelin. Myelin is insulation. It's basically like electrical wire. Saturated fat do? And for the most part, that's a wrong question, because the answer is it doesn't do anything. It's not supposed to do anything. It's just supposed to be food. It's just supposed to provide things that the body needs. And the body needs energy, and it needs components to build a structure. And fat, saturated fat, is one of the best forms of energy. It's clean burning, stable energy for the body. And then we use fats for structure. Like we said, we build cell membranes, we build myelin, we have insulation in the body. That is
Too easy.
understanding, then you also start thinking that more is always better. It's about balance, and it's about eating a variety of things that don't damage. So why then do we need more saturated fat at all? Well, there's certain things that we can provide the body. We can provide it fiber, and your body, your cells don't need fiber, but they feed the bacteria in your gut. They provide a certain bulk that create motility for regular bowel movement, so it does have a function. And then we have micronutrients, and these are things like vitamins and minerals and enzymes, and that's what the body uses to make things happen. When we make a protein, when we break down a food into energy, then those are cofactors. They're like little keys that fit into reaction and make them happen, or make them happen hundreds of times faster than they would have otherwise. Then we have proteins that we break down into amino acids, into symbols, into hormones, into signaling molecules, and into tissue, like muscles, hair, bones, and so forth. And then we have essential fatty acids, and one of the main functions there is, like we said, for the cell membranes, both in the nervous system, but also in every single cell in the body, have these essential fatty acids. And then, of course, one more thing we're looking for from food is energy. So then we have these different food groups that we can eat to provide the things your body is looking for. And these are things like leafy greens, non-starchy vegetables. We have meat, fish, fowl, game meat. We have nuts and seeds. We have natural fats, and we have starch and man-made oils, which I call anything that has been very harshly processed. And I know this is the gross oversimplification, but I'm just trying to make a point with this. So from the greens group, we get fiber and we get micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. But that's about it. Even though they have very small amounts of protein and natural fats, it's not enough that we could really live off of them. It's more like trace amounts. The next one is here we get micronutrients, we get lots of vitamins and minerals. We also get lots of protein.
Okay,
we get some
buddy.
essential fatty acids. All of these, but primarily from the fish and from the fatty fish. And then, of course, we get lots of energy from the meat group. The majority of energy or calories that we get from the meat group is in the form of natural fats. And then we have nuts and seeds, which provide fiber, it provides micronutrients, it provides protein, some essential fatty acids. And the reason I put a dotted line there is that yes, it has omega-3, but it doesn't contain the EPA, DHA, which is the minor end product we need in the cell membranes. And then we get very energy from nuts and seeds because they contain natural fats. And then we have natural fats. Here I'm talking about natural foods that have fat in them, but the fat is the normal part of that food, like meat, fish, nuts, and avocado. But I'm also talking about minimally processed oils, things like extra virgin olive oil. In some cases, avocado oil, oil, but we haven't really altered the food. We've just separated it into more concentrated oils. And the natural fats will provide some micronutrients, some vitamins in particular. We will provide some essential acids, especially in the fish, like we talked about. And of course, we get lots and lots of energy from those fats. And then we have the last group, which is the starches and the man-made oils. That's every oil that you find on the shelf called vegetable oil that's partially processed. And it is all of the grains, the rice and the bread and so forth. And it could have some fiber in it if it is not so processed, but it's not a major source. We could get some micronutrients, but again, if most of it's processed, that is very negligible. It has a little bit of protein, but the biggest reason I put these in dotted lines is that the main reason we would eat this to get the energy, to get the calories. So this brings us to the question of why would we eat more fat? Well, if we follow the guideline, if we think that saturated fat is so really bad, now we're going to be eating a lot of our food in the very fast group. We're going to eat lots of grain. We're going to eat lots of these polyunsaturated, partially processed oils that are really horrible for us. And we're going to get most of our really good nutrients from the first 3 groups. They're going to have the essential fatty acids, the essential amino acids, the vitamins and minerals, etc. But if we're looking at where most people get most of their calories, it's going to be either from fats or from grains. That's where the bulk of calories are, whether they are man-made or whether they are natural. And that brings us to the question of why would we eat more saturated fat than? And that's because if you buy into the idea that saturated fat is really bad and you try to eat as little as possible, you're going to find that you get most of your calories from the grain and starch and man-made oils portion. And if you start understanding that that group is not so great for you, that is where most of the SAD diet, the standard American diet calories come from that cause disease, then you have to replace those calories with something else. And then you have the other 4 groups to choose from. And here you have the first 3, which you could eat more of, but it's very expensive to get more calories just from high quality meat and from nuts and seeds and from leafy greens. It's kind of expensive. The nuts and seeds, not too terribly expensive, but more so than the fats, because these 2 categories are relatively very cheap. So between the cheap choices over here, all you have to know is that one does damage and the other one is neutral and stable. And that's all we're really looking for. Is looking for a wide variety of food that provide a wide variety of different benefits and enough calories, enough energy to sustain us. And in order to reduce the food that do damage, you have to cut out the last category. And the most logical place to increase your calories now is from whole food, and that's going to have some saturated fat in it. So a good starting point is what we call a paleo-type diet, and that goes back to the idea that our Paleolithic ancestors only ate certain things that were available to them at that time. And what they didn't have was sugar, they didn't have any grain, they didn't have any processed foods. So those you want to cut out completely or eat very, very minimal amounts of. You want to eat meat, fish, fowl, and game, and you want those to be as natural as possible. You want them to be raised in a natural environment and having eaten their innate food. And then you want to include a wide variety of nuts and seed, non-starchy vegetables, and some good natural fats like extra virgin olive oil, butter, and coconut oil. And then we want to have everything in moderation. I'm sure you've heard that expression, that everything in moderation. The only problem is that there is a wide range of beliefs and opinions about what moderation is. So I agree everything in moderation, but let's talk about what that might be. So if we follow the USDA guidelines, they suggest that we get 45 to 65% of our calories from carbohydrates. We should get 10 to 30% from protein, we should get 20 to 35% from fat, and we should get 6 to 10% from saturated fat. And the 6% is what the American Heart Association is trying to get people down to, and 10% is kind of the going recommendation, less than 10% of calories from saturated fats. But now, I would suggest that if you eat a paleo-type diet, and the reason I put that in quotation marks is that I don't believe that we should follow something as a religion. I think the paleo is the best starting point, but I think that we can use some common sense and trial and error to figure out what works for us. And if you just cut out the things I talked about, the sugar and the grain and the processed foods, you're going to dramatically reduce. There is no way to eat a paleo diet and get up to these numbers of carbohydrates. So if you're trying to be on the lower end, as if you're really trying quickly to reverse a metabolic problem like diabetes, then you might choose to be as low as 5% of net carbohydrates, which would be a ketogenic diet. I don't think everyone needs to do that, especially not all the time, but I think that you want to change your life up a little bit so that you go back and forth in that range. I think protein, they're not too terribly off. I want to tighten that up just a little bit. And then fat, I think, should be somewhere between 60 to 80%. And it doesn't mean that you try to gorge yourself on fat. It simply means if you eat natural food, if you eat nuts and seeds and avocado and meat, then, and you cut out the carbohydrates, you're naturally going to end up around 60 to 80%. If you don't eat a bunch of rice and potatoes and bread anymore, then that fat percentage is going to go up dramatically. But a lot of people have this misconception. They've heard of paleo and they think it's the caveman diet. And they think, well, that's very heavy in meat. They hardly ate anything but meat. And meat is all saturated fat, so therefore they think that the saturated fat portion should be the same as the total fat or close to it. Well, it turns out you're probably going to end up somewhere around 20 to 30% saturated fat, even if you increase your fat total by double or even more. So let's look at some of the foods that we included in the paleo diet, and let's see how they break down on fat. And we'll talk about nuts and seeds, fish, extra virgin olive oil, beef, and butter. And let's see how they break down on saturated fat, monounsaturated fatty acids, and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So nuts are going to vary a lot depending on the nut, but I'm just trying to get you a general idea that nuts do have some saturated fat in them, but they're mostly monounsaturated, and they have about a third polyunsaturated. And except for walnuts, the polyunsaturated is going to be pretty much all omega-6s. And then we have seeds that have about the same amount of saturated fat, but they're going to have less monounsaturated and a lot more polyunsaturated. So that's where we have things like flax seed and chia seed that are actually very high in omega-3s, and we have other things like safflower oil and sunflower oil that are going to be high, also high in polyunsaturated, but it's going to be mostly omega-6s. Then we look at fish, and we have about 15% saturated fat. We have a good bit of monounsaturated, but what fish is famous for is the polyunsaturated. And here, they're going to be almost entirely the best kind that the body is looking for. The polyunsaturated EPA and DHA. And extra virgin olive oil does have some saturated fat, but not a whole lot. It has almost all of its fat from monounsaturated fats. Just a tiny little bit of polyunsaturated, which would be omega-6s. And this profile also matches almost exactly what avocado would be. And here's the big surprise that most people don't realize, because they've heard that beef is all saturated fat, when in fact it is about equally split between saturated fat and monounsaturated fats, and then a tiny little bit of polyunsaturated. And again, those polyunsaturated, even though it's a small percentage, it does have some of the EPA and the DHA in it. And then we have butter, which has a very high, it's had about 65% of its fat as saturated fat, and then coconut oil is even higher. But think about that. How can butter be higher than beef, and yet butter melts easier, and coconut oil is even higher, even more saturated fat than butter, but it's liquid at room temperature. So there's differences between the saturated fat also. And beef has mostly what's called stearic acid, which is a long chain that when it's saturated, it gets very solid, it gets very hard and stable. Whereas butter has a lot of short-chain fatty acids. It has more of a mix-up of different lengths. And that's why if you take a stick of butter and you rub your finger on it, it gets oily very quickly. You're melting it very quickly. Whereas you're not going to be able to do that with beef fat. And the reason is that it has more of the short-chain fatty acids that behave completely differently. So it's a little misleading to look at the high percentage and think that that would be a bad thing or that we would be very saturated. The third benefit from eating more saturated fat would be to reduce inflammation. And the reason again is that saturated fat is more stable. It doesn't react as easily with heat, with light, and with oxygen. And therefore, it is less prone to oxidation, making less free radicals. That's what happens with oxidation. And therefore, it will reduce inflammation. And then there's some more benefits. We'll go through them pretty quick. Improve hormone production. Because cholesterol is a precursor for some of your hormones, especially the sex hormones and the very important cortisol. Even though it is often emphasized as a bad hormone because we stress too much, it is still necessary to have the precursors and be able to produce cortisol in the right amounts when necessary. Number 5 is improved satiety, improved fullness, and therefore improved weight control. Because if you eat something and you're full longer, you tend to eat less and you tend to eat less often. So the foods that contain saturated fats, like eggs and beef, are generally very good. Number 6 is improved immune function, and there's a couple of things here. Again, reduce inflammation is always going to help your immune system, but also some of the short-chain fatty acids are actually antibacterial and will assist the immune system. Number 7, saturated fats are better at stimulating the gallbladder and contributing to the absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K than other fats are. Number 8 is better bone health. Saturated fat helps improve the absorption of minerals, but again, reduced inflammation will help the body make better bones. And then we come to the big ones, because a lot of people will see this and they say that, okay, so saturated fat can be good for certain things, and it might improve the brain, it might improve cognition, and a few other things, but I am worried about my heart. And a lot of people really believe that you have to compromise, that you have to sacrifice your brain for the sake of your heart. But your body is way too smart for that. If it helps one part of the body, it helps all parts of the body. If it helps the whole, if it helps maintain balance and homeostasis, then it helps all parts of the body. So number 9 is that increasing your saturated fat can give you better heart health. So like we mentioned, the recommended levels of saturated fats are 6 to 10% of total calories, and basically they believe that less is better. But we have to understand that that has nothing to do with the true causes of cardiovascular disease. And they're so well established today that heart disease is caused by chronic low-grade inflammation and from oxidative stress. And we've talked over and over about how saturated fat is stable. It is neutral to inflammation and oxidative stress. It does not contribute at all to the true causes. Instead, it is the processed oils that we talked about. It's the sugar and the grain and all the things additionally causing insulin resistance that are pro-inflammatory that are the true cause of heart disease. So if you were to increase your intake of saturated fat from 10% to 25% saturated fat, like we talked about in the previous tables on the paleo diet, going to whole real food and cutting back on your carbs, then you will most likely improve your heart health. So now the skeptics will pull out one more argument, and they'll say that saturated fat increases cholesterol and cholesterol causes heart disease. So let's talk about that. It is true, in some people, saturated fat can increase your LDL cholesterol, and that's the LDL-C that is measured in milligrams per deciliter. That's the total weight, the total volume. And that's a very outdated marker. Almost everyone who knows anything agrees that that is not a very good marker of heart disease risk. But additionally, the saturated fat typically also increases the HDL-C, and it does that more so than it increases the LDL. So usually we hear that LDL is bad and HDL is good. That's not true. The body makes the appropriate type for whatever is going on in your body, and if you have a lot of inflammation, you tend to make more LDL and you tend to make a lot less HDL. If you reduce inflammation, then you can make a little more LDL, but you will increase HDL more. So one of the ratios that indicate heart disease risk is to take the total cholesterol and divide by your HDL. So let's say, for example, that your total cholesterol was 180 over 30, then that ratio would be 6. And a lot of people will say, oh, this is good. Your total cholesterol is 180. That's below 200. You're okay. You're in good shape. But it's not about the total number. That's another very outdated marker. It is almost completely irrelevant. So if we increase our saturated fat, what might happen is we increase total cholesterol, but we also increase the HDL. So now, if we went from 180 to 200, but the HDL goes from 30 to 40, we actually lower that ratio. That's a much better indicator of heart disease risk. But even though this ratio is useful, it is still lacking in detail, and it doesn't come close to the true risk factors for heart disease. So let's look at the true risk markers, and let's illustrate with a actual case that came through my office. And this was a person that watched some videos of mine, and he had changed his lifestyle, and for about a year he had eaten a paleo-type diet. So he had eaten pretty much like the numbers that I showed you before. And he felt better, he was healthier in many regards, his blood pressure was down, he was off a bunch of medications. But then his doctor looked at his total cholesterol numbers, and he was pressured to take a statin medication. So here's what happened. His total cholesterol went from 260 to 190, so a huge drop. His LDL went from 160 to 108, also a big drop. And his doctor was super happy. He said, look, how much healthier you are. So no one is disputing whether a statin drug can bring down cholesterol. It absolutely can, and it will. It goes right in and blocks certain pathways in the body, so the body can't regulate or produce cholesterol the way it wants. But the question is that necessarily a good thing? His HDL went from 91 to 66, so there was a dramatic drop in so-called good cholesterol. Now, his ratio was very good. Around 3 is optimal, and he stayed around 3. So that was not a problem there. But now we look at the actual risk markers, the biggest and most important risk markers. And that's not the weight of LDL in milligrams, but the number of particles. And that went from 1245 to 1410. So taking a statin increased the number of particles. And that's a much more important, much higher risk factor. And it's pretty incredible that you can decrease the volume of LDL, but increase the number of particles dramatically at the same time. And the reason that happens is not very healthy at all. So the size went from a very healthy 22.5 nanometers which would be an average size for his LDL particles, all the way down to 20.7, which is not a good number. And that's why he could increase his particle number. But the two most important markers is the number of particles and the number of particles that are small, that are under 20.5, because they are the ones that actually do the damage. The reason they're small is that they have been damaged by oxidation and by inflammation and by glycation, which is high blood sugar. So one of the most important markers is how many small LDL particles you have. And he went from less than 90, which means there's so few they can't accurately count, and he went all the way up to 699. So according to the way most people get treated and the way most doctors practice, they managed to lower the cholesterol. But again, this is very questionable whether that has any validity, whereas most of the numbers got worse. His HDL got worse. On the ratio, there was no change. On the particle count, it got worse. On the size and the number of small LDL particles, it got dramatically worse. So even though he was treated according to the standard of care, and on the surface it looked like a success, this person actually got a lot sicker from this treatment. And then of course he went from feeling really good to also having some muscle aches and fatigue, because when you block the cholesterol production to bring these numbers down, you also interfere with a very important enzyme called CoQ10 that is necessary for energy production. So your energy production suffers, and it suffers the most where you make the most energy, which is in your brain, in your heart, in your liver, and in the kidneys, and in the case of CoQ10, also in the muscles. So I'm not suggesting that a statin drug is never appropriate, but what I am saying is that as the standard care, when they only look at the total cholesterol and the LDL, and they prescribe statin drugs like candy, this person got significantly sicker when he should have just stayed with eating real food and measuring some additional markers to see if there was actually any risk. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.
아야.
Round 3. Fight. Fight.
아, 안 나.
You win. Get ready for the next battle.
Hello, Dr. Berg here. In this video, we're going to talk about saturated fats and insulin resistance. Okay, so a lot of times when you see in the news or on YouTube videos, there's a certain group of people that are really pushing that saturated fats are the cause of diabetes, problems with insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. So I just want to talk about some of the studies that are out there. That are so-called, they're using as proof. So check this out. There's 5 really high-quality studies that were done that compare consuming saturated fats to unsaturated fats. And 4 of the 5 studies showed absolutely no difference at all in any difference in relating to insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. Okay? Now the 5th study, called the CANU study, and that's the one that's most cited, most used in this argument. They used butter and margarine, okay, as their saturated fats. And it showed that it was almost statistically significant, kind of like being almost pregnant. So if you're almost pregnant, does that mean you're pregnant? So almost is not proof that consuming saturated fats will lead to diabetes, okay? So you can pretty much invalidate that study. And they pretty much omit all these other 4 studies. Okay, now there's other studies too that were more of a trial, and especially the large European lipogene random controlled diet trial. And they found that when you consume saturated fats, it had no effect on insulin sensitivity after 12 weeks. So I think the bottom line is, number one, a lot of these studies you have to pay for. You have to pay like it's $32 or $35 per study. No one's going to do that. Number 2, even if they have the studies, it's almost in Latin for most people. They can't understand, they can't really read it because there's too many big words, and they don't have the time. So they depend on other people who give you second-hand data on their interpretation of the study, which they can just pretty much say anything they want. So the next time you hear this on the news that, oh, it's saturated fats are bad, pull the string and find out who told you that, where that come from, get the study, and if you're nervous about it, pay for the study, get it out, read it, or have someone that is credible translate it for you. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, hey listen, I created a pretty amazing evaluation quiz down below that actually analyzes your symptoms to find the cause, the root cause of all of your symptoms, the most likely cause. So take the quiz now, and we'll send you a report.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ken Berry, a family physician with 20 years of clinical experience, and I'm going to give you some information in this live video that is going to blow your mind, that's going to freak you out, and it's also going to free you from your fear of saturated fat. Now, I know for the last 50 or 60 or 70 years, we've been told that saturated fat is bad for us.
거울
We're
왕자.
told you shouldn't eat any saturated fat. Any saturated fat's bad for you, right? And then we were told, well, you know, you just need to limit saturated fat because too much of it is bad for you. And then the American College of Cardiology stopped recommending
Get ready for the
a
next battle.
minimum intake of cholesterol because they well knew that eating cholesterol does not raise your cholesterol. And now they have an article that has been accepted by the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. That's in the pre-proof stage. It just has to be gone over again for typos. And it will be published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. And it is a state-of-the-art review about saturated fat intake and the dangers or the lack of danger in eating any amount of saturated fat. And that's what this live video is about. Now I want you to, if you have questions about this, ask me your questions in the comments. I'm going to be watching the comments. They go by very quickly. So if I haven't answered your question in a minute or two, type your question in again. So first I want to tell you about the politics behind this. I want to tell you about the article and the journal that's going to be published in. And then I want to tell you about some other studies that have been around for decades that were basically ignored that showed that replacing animal fats with plant vegetable oil fats is bad for you and causes more heart attacks, more cancer, and earlier death. But they ignored for what's 120 minus 65. That's how many years they've been ignoring this research. But this group of authors did this state-of-the-art review, and this is going to be published in the ACC Journal coming up, and this is a huge breakthrough for anyone who is either eating a low-carb diet, a keto diet, or a carnivore diet, or is contemplating eating low-carb, keto, or carnivore, and you were worried that it might increase your risk of heart attack or stroke, or that it might raise your cholesterol or make you have a higher risk of having heart disease. If that's the reason that you weren't doing keto, then you need to listen to this live. This is gonna break the chains of cholesterol, of the fear that if you eat what I call the proper human diet, you might be healthier, look healthier, but you're gonna have a heart attack. How many times have you heard that on social media or from your mama? Now, if you are watching this right now, please help me spread this good news by sharing this video, okay? You can, if you're on Facebook, you can start a watch party. You can type people's names in and tag them. You can invite friends to watch with you on YouTube. You can share this video on any other social media and share this while this is live. This will be available on Facebook and YouTube in perpetuity. And I've got links to all the research on my Facebook page and on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching from Instagram, I couldn't post the links for you guys, but they are on my Facebook page and they are on my YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed or following all three of those, you never know where I'm going to go live. So you're going to follow me on all three so that when I have a bright idea or when I come out with breaking research like this, you'll be one of the very first people to know. So first of all, the American College of Cardiology is good buddies with the American Heart Association. They're actually kind of the two sides of the same coin. And the American College of Cardiology and their journals is more for medical practitioners. The American Heart Association is supposed to translate their message to the general public and to raise money. That's the AHA's main reason for existence. But they're also supposed to help the general public understand what a heart health diet is. And for the last 50 or 60 years, they've been doing a terrible job of that. But I think that enough people who are eating keto and low carb and carnivore have shared their health transformation story with their doctor and their healthcare provider and their cardiologist and their endocrinologist. I think enough of you guys have done that it has trickled up to the top. And the powers that be at the ACC realize that the advice that they've been giving is stupid And not only stupid, but it's harmful. They've been harming people. And so the AHA and the ACC are very much a plant-based organization. I want you to understand that. They believe in their heart of hearts, in their religious, fervent, honest heart that a plant-based diet is the healthiest diet. That's what they believe, but that don't make it true, right? So there's all this research that's been out there that's either been just not published or has been actively suppressed. Showing that when you replace the saturated fat from animal fats with the polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils, people uniformly do worse. They have more heart attacks, they have more cancer, they get sicker quicker, and they die quicker. Yeah, there's actual, and now I'm going to tell you about those studies in a minute. You're going to be blown away because you've heard so many people say, well, there's just no research to back up keto or carnivore or low carb. That it's safe. You might lose weight and reverse your diabetes and reverse your fatty liver, but you're going to die of a heart attack. So that's bogus. That's not true. The fact that this plant-based organization, the ACC, who's kissing first cousins with the AHA, the fact that they allowed this to be published means that they know. They know beyond a shadow of a doubt, or they would have never allowed this to be published. So that's number one. They know that keto is right. They know that low carb is right. They know that animal fats do not increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, or cancer, or any other dumb crap that we're told that it increases your risk of. Otherwise, they would have never allowed this to be published. You have to understand that, number one. Number two, this is a huge backtrack for them. If they've been right for all these decades, they would have laughed at somebody who presented this paper unless they knew they were wrong. So this is not a formal apology from the ACC or the AHA, but it is one step in that direction. And I think you'll quickly see by hanging out with me on this live that this is the first major domino to fall, which is going to lead to all the other dominoes falling from saying that animal meat is bad for you, animal fats are bad for you, that high cholesterol is bad for you, that even high LDL is bad for you. You should take a statin or other cholesterol-lowering drug. All of those dominoes are about to fall. And I can predict that because the ACC allowed this paper to be published in their prestigious hard journal. Think about the politics of that. 10 years ago, if these same authors had brought the same information to the ACC, they would have laughed them out of the room. Like, you're an idiot if you think the ACC is going to publish this. I don't care what the research says. We'll never publish that. The fact that they're going to publish this in their journal is a huge win for the low-carb, keto, carnivore community. It's also a huge blow for the vegan community and for the plant-based Eat Plant Set. For all those guys who want you to eat a plant-based diet, this is a huge blow to their argument because basically the ACC is admitting there's no minimum or maximum amount of saturated fat that we can recommend that's either healthy or not healthy. So this is a huge deal. Now you guys watching, tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how big the reach is. What city are you in? What state? What country? Tell me in the comments and let me see where you're at so I can know how to tailor this to you. So Unexpected Hilarity said, what about avocado oil, coconut oil, and olive oil? Great question. So those are, first of all, not vegetable seed oils. Those are fruit seed oils. All three of those are fruit. And so I don't have any problem with the fruit seed oils. I think that avocado oil, coconut oil, and olive oil are fine. I think you can eat probably as much of those as you want, and you don't have to worry about anything. They're definitely not going to increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. And indeed, you remember the AHA came out with a position paper about a year and a half ago saying that coconut oil was the devil because it was full of saturated fat. And now their kissing cousin, the ACC, has come out and allowed this paper to be published. It says, yeah, no, there's no minimum, there's no minimum like cutoff level. Oh, if you eat more saturated fat than this, it's dangerous. There is no level that they can talk about because there is no science that proves that position. So, and good question. Sharon says, do you think cardiologists will give credit to this research? The ACC journal is the preeminent cardiology heart journal in the world. So if they don't listen to this,
아니면 나랑
they're living
하루
in fairy tale land. They are basically admitting to themselves
밤새도
and
새벽날
indirectly to their patients, I believe what I believe, and I don't give a damn what the research says. I believe what I believe, and you're going to do what I say. At that point, how good of a doctor are you really? Think about that. Any healthcare providers watching, you need to get a copy of this article. So the article is behind the paywall, and it's because only members of the ACC have access to the full text. I paid $35 and got this thanks to my Facebook supporters and patrons on patreon.com. This is the kind of stuff that I use that money for. I got the full paper, so I was able to read all the citations. So, yeah, and so every healthcare provider listening, you owe it to your patients. If you're not a member of the ACC, you owe it to your patients to pay $35 and get the PDF of this article. Read this article and realize that if the ACC allowed this to be published in their journal, tides are turning. The paradigm is shifting. They are admitting that a high-fat diet is not dangerous. They're admitting that there is no maximum level of safe intake for saturated fats. That's a huge deal. You need to understand that. Now, let me go through the other research that really matters. And so if any of you guys follow me much, you know that the strongest research of all is a randomized controlled trial in human beings that goes on for some period of time, right? You don't want a study that has 4 people in it. You want a study with a lot of people. You don't want a study that only lasts for 7 or 10 days. You want a study that lasts for months, if not years. Let me tell you about 3 studies that I've done that were either not published at all or that were published in some obscure journal in Norway that nobody read, and therefore they can claim, I'm being ethical here. I published my results. But these studies should have been published by the American College of Cardiology, but were not. So the first study was done in 1965. And some of you may be thinking, well, that's antique. That probably was not even done right. No. That's back when scientists and researchers actually did research properly. That's when that was. So back in 1965, there was a study called the corn oil in treatment of ischemic heart disease. It was a 2-year-long study, so very long. It was done on thousands of people, and it was a randomized controlled trial. I thought people said you can never do a randomized controlled trial about diet. That's what Walter Willett says at the Harvard School of Public Health. Well, back in 1965, they did it, and they did a great job, and I've got a link to that article on my Facebook page and YouTube channel, and they found that when you replace the animal saturated fat that you find in egg yolks, butter, fatty meat, and full-fat dairy, when you replace that with margarine and corn oil, people have more heart attacks, and they have a higher rate of cancer, and they die sooner. This was a 2-year-long randomized controlled trial in human beings, and it showed without a doubt that corn oil is much more dangerous than the saturated fatty acids in animal fats. That's number 1. Then along comes the Sydney Diet Heart Study, done in Sydney, Australia. It was done in 1967, 2 years later, back when scientists did science properly. This is also a randomized controlled trial. This was also done in humans. It lasted for 8 years. So yes, there is an 8-year-long randomized controlled trial study in human beings, not in rats or rabbits or spider monkeys. That shows that when you replace the saturated fat found in animal fat products like butter, egg yolks, ghee, fatty meat, with a vegetable oil rich in linoleic acid, you actually increase the risk of heart attack. You actually increase the plaquing in their heart arteries. You know, the plaque buildup, that actually is worse with vegetable oil. They have an increased risk of cancer, and they die sooner. 8-year-long study. but it was never talked about. It was never published in any reputable journal back then, because back then was when they were really in love with the lipid heart hypothesis, that saturated fat caused high cholesterol and that caused heart attacks, and that was the end of the story. That's what everybody believed. Okay? So that's what you got to understand, is that these studies have been done. Just nobody knows about it because they hid them. One of these studies was found in a retired professor's basement on the magnetic film from the old big room-sized computers, and he just put it in his basement and forgot about it because it did not support the anti-disease hypothesis. It did not support the lipid heart hypothesis of heart disease. So he knew that if he published it, he would be ruined as a scientist. He wouldn't get any more research money. Definitely wouldn't get any grant money from big food or big pharma, because they want to sell pills and junk food. They don't want people to know the truth about science. Then the third study was done in 1969. The Minnesota coronary experiment. This was a randomized controlled trial in human beings. It was not done in fruit flies or pangolins. It was actually done in humans, and it was randomized and controlled, and it was a 5-year-long study that had hundreds and hundreds of participants. And they found that when you replace the saturated fats found in animal fats like butter, eggs, bacon, ghee, and things like that with vegetable oil, guess what they found? You want to guess? People have more heart attacks. They had more heart plaquing. They died sooner, and they had a higher rate of cancer. So I've got links to all three of these studies that were randomized controlled trials in human beings that had a huge participant number and lasted for the shortest one was 2 years long. I've got links on my Facebook page and on my YouTube channel. So don't ever again let anybody tell you that there's no proof that keto won't kill you. Yeah, we got the proof. We've had the proof since 1965. Animal fats are good for human beings. Vegetable oils are bad for human beings. Or you could say they're less good than animal fats. These studies pretty much wrap that O up and put a bow on it and send it to you for your birthday. Okay? And now this study in the ACC journal that has about 10 authors, some of the names you would know, like Jeff Bullock, Saturated Fats and Health, a reassessment and proposal for food-based recommendations. So instead of just picking out one little micro or macronutrient like saturated fat and vilifying it, let's look at the entire food. So let's not talk about saturated fat. Let's talk about butter and its health benefits, because most of the foods that your doctor or your dietitian or your other healthcare provider say, well, that's a fat, that's bad for you, that's a very childish thing to say. That's very soft-boiled. Let's take butter, for example. So yeah, butter has saturated fat in it. I'm glad it does. But butter also is a multivitamin and a multi-mineral. If it's a pastured cow that gave you the milk that produced that milk fat, that butter, that is like taking a multivitamin with that. It has a plethora of healthy fatty acids in it. It has lots of minerals. It has lots of vitamins. Hugely, hugely healthy food. Same goes for fatty ground beef. Oh, well, that's just a protein, some people would say, because it's meat. Other people would say, oh, it's a fat, because it's the fatty. You got 70-30, that's fat, that's bad for you. No, that is a literal superfood, full of every amino acid you need for optimal health, full of every fatty acid you need for optimal health, and full of vitamins and minerals that you cannot get from any plant on the planet. That's what ground beef, 70-30 ground beef is. So, well, bacon. Bacon is the devil. Ask anybody, they'll tell you, right? Bacon is the devil. So, what is bacon? Bacon is fat and protein. It's fatty meat and lean meat in strips. And if this is a pastured pig, that is going to have every essential amino acid you need for optimal health. It's going to have every fatty acid you need for optimal health. And it's going to have a multivitamins worth of vitamins and minerals if it's a pasture. pig.
Get ready for the
So
next battle.
where's the danger? Why am I going to die of a heart attack if I eat keto? Tell me again, because I missed your point. So the entire reason that your doctor or your dietitian or your mama tells you, oh, I heard bad things about keto, you better not eat keto, you'll have a heart attack. Well, there's only one peg they were hanging their coat on. It was full of saturated fat. And this review, and this is not new research. I want to talk about something that's very, very common but very unknown. It has to do with the connection between your liver and right side shoulder blade pain. Now, if I'm going to face this way, this is my right side over here, we have the scapula looking from behind. Here's the spine. Here's a muscle, okay? This muscle is called the rhomboid. It brings the scapula inward and upward that way. You have a little muscle right here. It's called the levator anguli scapula. Now, if you have pain right in this space, right here, or up here, or right down here, chances are it's the liver. The liver is the most common source of this referred pain. But people don't connect the dots because they think the problem is right here, and they'll swear it's from maybe just bursitis, tendinitis, or some injury, when in fact they've never really had an injury in that area, possibly. Now, this could also be the gallbladder or the bile duct, because when the gallbladder has stones or it's congested or there's some blockage or irritation in the bile duct, that can irritate a nerve called the phrenic nerve, and you have two of them, and it can shoot up right here and cause a pain up on the right side, and definitely up here. So if it's more up here, usually it's more gallbladder. Down here, it's more liver. Now, if it's on the opposite side, it can be more pancreas. But both of these problems are related to digestion and food. Take a look at a couple things that could cause a liver problem. One is inflammation. You ate something that created some inflammatory response either in your liver or the gallbladder. Or you have a fatty liver because you're consuming too much of some of these foods right here, and then there's not enough space in there. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it refers pain right back here. Now, I personally had right shoulder pain and right rhomboid pain for 12 freaking years, and I had no idea it was related to my liver. In fact, I went to chiropractic college hoping that I would get it fixed, and after a million treatments, nothing worked until after I graduated, and I eventually figured out what it was, and I changed the diet, and all that pain mysteriously went away. I wish I would have known what I know now back then. So alcohol can mess with the liver. A high-carb diet will do it. Too much iron can cause irritation, inflammation, and cirrhosis of the liver. Vegetable oils, okay, or medications can do it too. Check this out. Now, if we compare back in the 70s to present time, and we look at the amount of grain consumption, we had an increase of 29%. So that's an average of 122 pounds of grains per person per year in the United States. Now, I definitely don't consume 122 pounds at all, so someone must be consuming a lot more than that. But this doesn't really compare to these next two. Check this out. In the 1970s, we consumed 4.9 pounds of corn. And I'm talking about corn products, or corn oil, or corn sweeteners, as in high fructose corn syrup. Now, if we compare that to present time, 14 pounds. So we went from 4.9 pounds to 14 pounds. That's 3 times more. That is an incredible amount of corn that people are consuming. But check this out, vegetable oils, right? Which are really grain oils. 12 pounds in the 70s. Now it's 36 pounds. That is the spike 3 times. That is a crazy amount of vegetable oils, which, by the way, these are both GMO, and they're highly inflammatory. They could potentially irritate the liver, the gallbladder, and create this pain. If you're new to my channel, you should definitely learn about something called healthy keto and intermittent fasting. It can help you. I put a link down below. But if you want more information about the liver and what to eat, I put that video right here. Check it out.
샌드위치로 아씨 씨. 이길 수 있었는데
Fight.
ちゃった。あー、12。どうしよう。ああ、無理や。
Get ready for the next battle.
Right shoulder pain right here is usually coming from your gallbladder. Massage underneath your right rib cage for 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to notice a great improvement in the right shoulder. Why is this? Because the nerve called the phrenic nerve is connecting your gallbladder to this part of your neck. But the massage on your gallbladder will not fix this problem. The real problem is your diet. You need to avoid grains, seed oils, sugar, starches, and nuts. Right shoulder pain right here is usually coming from your gallbladder. Massage underneath your right rib cage for 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to notice a great improvement in the right shoulder. Why is this? Because the nerve called the phrenic nerve is connecting your gallbladder to this part of your neck. But the massage on your gallbladder will not fix this problem. The real problem is your diet. You need to avoid grains, seed oils, sugar, starches, and nuts. Right shoulder pain right here is usually coming from your gallbladder. Massage underneath your right rib cage for 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to notice a great improvement in the right shoulder. Why is this? Because the nerve called the phrenic nerve is connecting your gallbladder to this part of your neck. But the massage on your gallbladder will not fix this problem. The real problem is your diet. You need to avoid grains, seed oils, sugar, starches, and nuts. Right shoulder pain right here is usually coming from your gallbladder. Massage underneath your right rib cage for 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to notice a great improvement in the right shoulder. Why is this? Because the nerve called the phrenic nerve is connecting your gallbladder to this part of your neck. But the massage on your gallbladder will not fix this problem. The real problem is your diet. You need to avoid
GoPro. GoPro. 뭘 좀 먹고 와야겠어. 계란이라도 먹게. 방송 끌게요. 피곤해서 방송 좀 끌게요 이제. 아 눈을 못 뜨겠네. 잘 주무세요 조원사님.